and a Democratic member of the House Judiciary and Transportation and Infrastructure Committees. He's also a member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. So what do you make, Congressman, of those arguments by your more moderate colleagues? I mean, if they're not on board, nothing gets passed, right?
Well, I think my colleagues, my 9 colleagues, are assuming also that if the Senate bipartisan bill comes to the House floor for a vote, that it's going to pass the House as it is now. And I don't think that that is a reasonable assumption to have. I mean, after all, the House passed the Invest in America Act, which provided for funding for our infrastructure, heavy emphasis on transit, heavy emphasis on rail, both freight and passenger, to put this country in a new posture where we're getting away from motor vehicles, whereas the Senate bipartisan plan, and by the way, I congratulate the Senate for passing a bill, much less a bipartisan bill, and so they're to be commended for that. But the House has its prerogatives and its priorities. And, to think that the Senate bipartisan bill will just flow through the House with a kind of a crammed down type of mentality. We passed this, so you have to pass it, with no bargaining, no consideration of the House priorities. I think that's a wrong assumption to take. But beyond that, for 9 members to hold up progress, I mean, it's been the consensus of both Democrats in the House and the Senate that we would that the Senate would pass the bipartisan infrastructure bill. The Senate would pass a budget framework for the House, $3.5 trillion. That's what they did. The Senate has delivered. Now the ball is in the court of the House, and for 9 members to now come and say that we're going to do away with our consensus that we had, and we insist that the tail wag the dog. Gotcha. I don't think the dog is going to respond positively to that.
But how do you convince your more moderate colleagues, your Republican colleagues, who are all worried about the cost here, not just the cost of budget reconciliation, but they brought up concerns about the cost of the bipartisan infrastructure plan? How do you convince them? It sounds like you want to keep tacking on more to that Senate-approved bill. How do you convince them that that's the right way to go?
Well, the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill would be paid for largely by increasing taxes on those who make in excess of $400,000 per year. So we're talking about folks who got a $5.8 trillion tax cut back in 2017 when they didn't need it, and 83% of that went to the top 1%. Now we're asking those same folks to come back. Instead of a $5.7 trillion handout, we're asking them, or we're going to be requiring them to pay their fair share of a $4.5 trillion bill to get our country, to build our country back better. That was the pledge that elected the Biden-Harris administration. It is the consensus that we as Democrats in the House and Senate have held, and that's what we plan to see forged through. And we, quite frankly, kind of shoot ourselves in the head when we start insisting that we're going to vote, we're going to deviate from the plan that has been our consensus from day one. I don't think that's a reasonable course of action for the House to take, and I don't think the House is going to take that action.
Okay. Well, I want to shift gears here and talk about voting rights, because just last month you were among those arrested while protesting essentially the inaction on federal voting rights legislation. But Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says now the upper chamber will vote on voting rights first thing when they return in September. I mean, wasn't the promise before that it was going to happen before August recess? Do you have confidence that this will in fact happen?
Well, I think that it's been very challenging for the House to get to the point where we're on the cusp of passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, H.R. 4. We're being called back into session a week from this coming Monday. And one of the things that we will do is to vote to approve of the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which we will then send to the Senate, which, of course, has worked hard. They just started their August break after passing that budget bill that they sent to us. And we'll also pass that budget framework next week when we get called back.
All right. A lot on your agenda. Congressman, thank you so much for your time. Good to talk to you.